Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Gene Morrigan, 49 years old, and for over 2 decades, I lived and breathed offshore oil platforms. I wasn't just another lifer out there for the paycheck. I was the guy everyone counted on when something didn't smell right, the guy who kept them alive. I was safety chief on Atlas Platform 9, a massive rig 60 miles off the Texas Gulf. It was a beast of a machine, roaring day and night, churning out black gold under the glare of steel towers and salt-scarred metal. I earned every wrinkle on my face through blood, sweat, and more close calls than I care to count. And I earned every ounce of mistrust I had for corporate. Things changed the moment Damon Voss arrived. Young, sleek, Harvard MBA type. Looked like he belonged in a boardroom, not the blistering heat and thunder of the Gulf. He was the new rig supervisor, barely 36, and already talking about maximizing throughput and agile extraction protocols. I kept my head down at first. Let the guy talk. But when he started questioning my reports, my safety protocols, I knew trouble was brewing. "You file more safety tickets in a week than the other rigs do in a month," he said one day, standing over me as I logged pressure discrepancies on the wellbore monitors. "You know what that looks like to Houston?" I didn't look up. "That it's the only rig not cutting corners." His face tightened. "It looks like you're slowing us down. Making us look incompetent." He didn't get it. Or maybe he did, and just didn't care. This wasn't my first rodeo. I started out on rigs back when men still smoked near open tanks and considered duct tape a repair strategy. I'd seen blowouts, fires, men lost to preventable malfunctions. One of them was my friend Danny. He bled out with a pipe shard in his gut while we waited for a medevac that never came. That's when I swore I'd never let bureaucracy or budget override safety again. So when I noticed irregular readings on the blowout preventer, readings I knew meant potential disaster, I flagged it. Again. Damon didn't want to hear it. "We replaced that system 3 weeks ago," he barked. I signed off myself. "That's the problem," I muttered. That night, I couldn't sleep. I ran the numbers again, double-checked system logs. The same pattern kept emerging: hydraulic pressure inconsistencies, unexplained system resets, maintenance logs signed off without real checks. I confronted Damon the next day. In front of the team. Maybe I shouldn't have, but I couldn't let it slide. "Not this time. You're pushing production by bypassing safety checks," I said flatly. He didn't deny it. Just smiled. "You've outlived your usefulness, Gene." By the end of my shift, I was ordered to pack my gear and was helicoptered off the rig with nothing but my duffel and a thick file of evidence on my external hard drive. No severance. No thank you. No warning. After 23 years of protecting lives out there, I was tossed aside like a used wrench, because I refused to sign off on shortcuts that could kill. I went home to an empty apartment, but my conscience wasn't empty. I hadn't spent the last year documenting violations and shady substitutions for nothing. I'd been fired, but I wasn't done. When that chopper lifted off, I watched the rig shrink into the distance like a cursed island disappearing into fog. I didn't realize at the time, I wasn't just leaving a job. I was leaving behind a war zone. And I'd just been disarmed. Back in Corpus Christi, my apartment felt hollow. Stale takeout boxes on the counter, unread mail stacked by the door, and silence where the hum of diesel engines used to be. My muscles ached, not from work, but from absence. 23 years offshore had conditioned me to the rhythm of danger. I didn't know how to sit still. But now I was jobless, blacklisted, and branded a liability. I opened my laptop. I had backups, photos of damaged equipment, falsified inspection forms, mismatched serial numbers on replacement valves. A mountain of proof. I documented it all. But none of it mattered if no one would look. I emailed Ravenrock's corporate HR. A formal complaint with attachments, timestamps, and a breakdown of federal safety code violations. 3 days later, I got a terse reply. Operations on Atlas Platform 9 are in full compliance with federal and internal regulations. Your termination was due to repeated disruption of workflows and performance concerns. Continued defamatory communications may result in legal action. No acknowledgement. No investigation. Just a corporate muzzle disguised as a letterhead. They weren't just ignoring me, they were threatening me. I felt it then, real despair. Not anger. Not fear. Despair. Because they could get away with it. I called the Bureau of Offshore Energy Compliance. I'd filed periodic reports with them before, the safe kind that disappear into red tape. This time, I requested a formal review. The woman on the line transferred me 3 times before I landed on a middle manager who spoke like he was reading from a script. You were recently terminated from Atlas Platform 9, correct? Yes. Mr. Morrigan, we generally avoid engaging in investigations initiated by disgruntled former employees unless substantial corroborating evidence exists. I have 8 months of it. Documents, timestamps, even pictures. You're welcome to submit them. But please understand we receive thousands of internal complaints each year. We can't act on every one. By the end of the call, I realized what I was up against. A billion-dollar corporation. Government agencies running on underfunded coffee and overloaded inboxes. And me, a man with a file folder and a fire in his gut. I sent the documentation anyway. But I knew what would happen. Nothing. 2 weeks passed. I heard nothing. Then my phone rang. Jason Parker. He'd been my assistant for 6 months. Young, sharp, loyal. Too good for that rig. He sounded tired. Gene, something's wrong out there. We met at a diner just past the county line. Neutral ground. He slid a USB stick across the table like it was a loaded weapon. They're running 30% over normal capacity. Damon's pushing the equipment to its breaking point. We had a pressure spike that almost blew the entire wellhead last week. You know what he did? He turned down the alarm sensitivity. I stared at him. He disabled the alarms. Jason nodded. And he's not alone. I saw an email on his laptop. It was from someone at Ravenrock HQ, telling him what inspections to skip. What to fast track. Gene, it's not just Damon. This goes all the way up. I sat there, cold coffee untouched, hands trembling. They'll kill someone, I said quietly. If this keeps up, they'll kill someone. Jason looked me in the eye. That's why I brought you this. That night, I loaded the USB into my computer. What I found made my stomach twist. Internal memos discussing cost-saving measures by skipping hydraulic fluid changes. Maintenance checklists with digitally altered timestamps. And the worst, video footage of Damon ordering a bypass on the blowout preventer system. A direct, on-camera violation of federal law. This was it. I didn't just have circumstantial evidence anymore. I had a time-stamped, high-res, face-to-camera confession. But even with that, I knew how careful I'd need to be. If I went public too early, they'd spin it. Bury me in lawsuits. Maybe even try to frame me. So I made a plan. The next morning, I called the regional director of the bureau again. This time, I didn't leave a message. I drove 3 hours to New Orleans and walked through their front door with a folder full of truth and fire in my eyes. Her name was Diana Foster. Senior Enforcement Officer. Sharp-eyed. No nonsense. She sat across from me for an hour and didn't blink once. She watched the video. Then watched it again. This is substantial, she said finally. We've had suspicions about Ravenrock. But they're smart. Spread violations across multiple platforms. Just enough to stay under our radar. I said nothing. Until now, I thought. She turned her screen to show me a list of compliance violations. Dozens. None made public. Minimal fines. All swept under the rug. This changes things, Diana said. But I need to be honest with you, Mr. Morrigan. If we go forward, they will come after you. Legally. Personally. They'll try to destroy your reputation. I looked her dead in the eye. They already took everything. I've got nothing left to lose. She nodded. Then let's bring them down. I walked out of that government office with something I hadn't felt in weeks: purpose. Not hope, no, that was too fragile a thing right now. But direction. I knew where this was going, and I knew what I had to do. For the next several days, I worked directly with Diana Foster and her enforcement team. Every document I'd collected, every report Jason and I had archived, every anomaly in the maintenance logs, we pieced it all together like a forensic puzzle. And the deeper we dug, the darker it got. Jason sent me another encrypted batch of files. These weren't just logs. They were internal memos from Ravenrock executives, coded language about accelerated production directives, equipment amortization extensions, and asset monetization strategies. Corporate speak for cut corners, skip maintenance, ignore risk. One memo in particular made my blood run cold. Continue with component substitution plan for platforms 7, 9, and 11. Cost savings from procurement overhaul justify accelerated revenue goals. Confirm field team compliance. Do not include informal audit trail. Jason had found it in a temp folder on Damon's work laptop. They weren't just gambling with lives. They were orchestrating it. On paper, it was a brilliant strategy: spread the violations across different rigs, different time frames. Nothing too dramatic. Just enough shortcuts in each place to slip through inspections. Death by 1,000 paper cuts. But this memo showed coordination, intent. And that changed everything. I shared it with Diana. She stared at the screen for a long time before saying, "This isn't just negligence anymore. This is criminal conspiracy." But then she sighed. Problem is, they know how to cover their tracks. They've been dodging us for years. We'll need something irrefutable. That's when I remembered the safety footage. Every platform had multiple hardwired cameras, some for security, some for process documentation. They couldn't all be scrubbed. Not if they were on a secure internal server. Jason mentioned an IT guy, I told her. Quiet. Kept to himself. Name's Alan. If anyone can get us raw server files from the rig, it's him. That night, I called Jason again. It took some convincing, but Alan came through. 3 days later, I had another USB drive in hand, this one with 3 weeks of unedited rig surveillance. It was like holding a live grenade. And in the middle of those files, time-stamped, zoomed in, crystal clear, was footage of Damon Voss bypassing a secondary shutoff valve during a high-pressure operation. Not once, but twice. And in one clip, he even says it out loud. We don't have time for the standard sequence. Override it. The loss if this stalls is worse than the risk. Worse than the risk. I emailed the video to Diana. Within an hour, she called me back. We're launching a full inspection, she said. Unannounced. We're sending a field engineer, certified mechanical specialist. Someone trained to see through temporary fixes. Send him fast, I said. Because Damon knows I've been collecting evidence. If he's smart, and he is, he's already scrubbing that rig clean. Her voice turned grave. We'll act before he can. The night before the inspection, Jason texted me. Overtime across all crews. Damon's got us patching everything. Not fixing, hiding. I forwarded it to Diana. Her response. Expected. We're ready. The inspection team was airborne at dawn. I wasn't allowed to join them. Regulations. But I waited outside Diana's office like a man pacing the waiting room before a verdict. At 4:12 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. BOP failed pressure test. Inspectors staying longer. Damon freaking out. I showed Diana. That's our guy, she said with a grim smile. If the BOP failed, we've got our justification to open a full review. I didn't dare let myself hope. Not yet. But at 6:12 p.m., her phone rang. She listened, took notes, then hung up and turned to me. They found enough. Multiple violations. Some extremely serious. The blowout preventer system you flagged would have failed in an actual emergency. Catastrophically. And now we're shutting it down. Full regulatory intervention begins tomorrow. I sat down, slowly. My legs were shaking. I hadn't realized how much tension I'd been carrying. How much guilt, even though none of this was my fault. And then she added, Damon tried to obstruct the inspection. Refused access to several systems. That alone triggers further scrutiny. I exhaled. He's panicking. Good, she said. Let him. The next morning, the oil stopped flowing. Atlas Platform 9 went dark. It wasn't public, yet. But to me, it felt like a tectonic shift. 23 years of warnings, of standing in the storm alone, had led to this moment. And it was just the beginning. Diana and the Bureau launched what they called a Level 3 full systems audit. Every pipe, every maintenance log, every inspection, under the microscope. The violations started pouring in. But I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. I knew how fast corporations like Ravenrock could pivot. They'd try to isolate Damon. Paint him as a rogue supervisor acting alone. I needed to make sure the entire machine was exposed. I got to work. First, I made a list, names of everyone I'd worked with over the past year who had quietly questioned changes, raised doubts, whispered concerns in break rooms when no one else was listening. People like Jason. People who cared. I contacted each one, carefully. 6 agreed to talk. 5 more sent me private documents, altered parts orders, overwritten timestamps, emails from management urging efficiency over protocol. But the most damning came from a name I hadn't heard in months. Gary Tran. He used to be a platform manager, my boss before Damon. Ravenrock gave him early retirement, but he never told anyone why. Just vanished. When I called, he didn't answer. I left a message. Gary, it's Gene. I need to talk. About Atlas 9. About what they did to you. 2 hours later, he called back. Gene, you don't know what you're digging into. I think I do. No, he said flatly. You really don't. We met at a hotel bar on the outskirts of Houston. He looked older, thinner. Worn down. But when I showed him what I had, Jason's videos, the audit report, the memos, he leaned forward. You're doing what I couldn't, he said. Then he gave me his file. An entire folder, handwritten notes, emails forwarded to a personal account, a voice recording of a meeting with a Ravenrock executive who all but admitted to incentivizing production over safety. It was the missing link, proof that Damon wasn't acting alone. That he was the executioner of a plan designed at the very top. I sent it all to Diana. By this point, the Bureau's team had discovered over 60 violations on Atlas 9 alone. Faulty blowout preventers. Bypassed sensors. Safety alarms disabled or tampered with. But now, with Gary's records and my crew testimonies, we had proof of premeditation. Still, we needed one last thing. A voice. A public one. I'd avoided the press up to that point, afraid of lawsuits, or worse, being discredited. But now, we were past that. I called a reporter I trusted, Elena Ruiz, an investigative journalist who once exposed environmental corruption at another major oil firm. She didn't just write headlines. She dug deep. She didn't flinch. I showed her everything. Her eyes widened. You realize this could tank the company. They already tanked themselves, I said. I'm just holding up the mirror. She nodded. I'll need a formal statement. A full interview. I'll give it to you. And I did. On camera. Full name. No filters. No aliases. I told the world exactly what happened on Atlas 9. How I was fired for doing my job. How my supervisor ordered violations that could have killed every man out there. And how Raven Rock Energy built its profits on buried risks and silent graves. The story went live 3 days later. Headline: Whistleblower exposes oil giant's safety scandal, they tried to bury the truth, and me with it. It went viral in hours. By the time the news reached Wall Street, Raven Rock stock had already dropped 12%. Within 2 days, it dropped 23%. Then came the class action lawsuits. Former employees. Contractors. Even family members of crewmen injured years earlier on other rigs. Suddenly, everyone wanted in. But I wasn't finished yet. Damon. He was still out there. Still employed. Still being internally reviewed. That night, I got a call from Jason. You might want to see this. He texted me a photo, a screen capture from Damon's private rig laptop Jason had managed to access again before being transferred off the platform. It was an internal chat between Damon and a VP. Clean up everything. If inspectors ask, say Gene was disgruntled. Make it personal. We'll settle if needed, but make sure he's radioactive in the industry. Radioactive. They weren't just trying to ignore me, they were trying to ruin me forever. I stared at the screen and made a decision. I wasn't just going to win. I was going to bury them. They thought I'd go quietly. That they could blacklist me, smear me, and I'd just disappear into a haze of bitterness and old oil rig stories. They didn't know me at all. With the Bureau's audit expanding and Elena's exposé dominating headlines, the cracks in Raven Rock's empire were starting to show. Investors panicked. Regulators piled on. Employees started jumping ship, each of them hoping to avoid being the last one left holding the corporate guilt. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. I'd spent my entire career playing by the rules, trusting the system. And look where it got me. Fired, discredited, and nearly buried under legal threats. But now, I had leverage. Proof. And more importantly, momentum. I made 3 moves in 48 hours. First, I leaked a second wave of documents anonymously through a whistleblower advocacy group. Documents that Gary Tran had passed me, ones that hadn't gone public yet. These weren't just about Atlas 9. They implicated platforms 7, 11, and 14 as well. It showed a pattern, systematic risk management fraud designed to boost quarterly profits. The advocacy group blasted it to every newsroom from Houston to D.C. Second, I filed a formal whistleblower petition with the Department of the Interior, requesting federal protection, and, more importantly, escalation of the case to include criminal charges. Diana helped push it through. And then, I made the third move. I confronted Damon Voss. Directly. He was still in Houston, still on payroll, and according to Jason, still lying to anyone who would listen. I found him at a quiet steakhouse on the west side of town, Raven Rock's go-to spot for big deals and bigger egos. I didn't go in to start a fight. I didn't need to. I just walked up to his table, calmly placed a printed photo of the bypassed shutoff valve from Jason's video on the linen tablecloth, and said, This is the moment you stopped being a supervisor and became a criminal. He went pale. His fork clattered to the plate. I've got video. Audio. Internal chat logs. Everything. You think you're some kind of hero, he hissed. No, I said. I think I'm the man who didn't let you get people killed. You're going to regret this. I smiled. You already do. And I walked away. 2 days later, the Bureau released its preliminary report. Over 70 critical safety violations on Atlas 9. Bypassed alarm systems. Forged maintenance records. Aftermarket parts not rated for offshore use. But the best part? The report named specific individuals. Damon Voss was listed first. That night, I received a call from Diana. Her tone was sharper than usual. Gene, there's been an emergency meeting between the Bureau, the DOJ, and the Department of Energy. Your evidence may trigger a multi-agency investigation into Raven Rock. What does that mean? It means they're not just shutting down platforms anymore. They're preparing indictments. I sat there in stunned silence. Then she added, and Gene, they want you to testify. I'd never imagined myself on a witness stand. But suddenly, that platform I was fired from, that isolated deck of steel and sea, had become ground zero in a case that might change the entire offshore industry. Raven Rock retaliated, of course. Their lawyers filed a motion claiming my evidence was fabricated, that I was emotionally unstable, that I had a history of paranoia on rigs. They tried to subpoena my personal email, my hard drives, even suggested I may have planted faulty parts myself. It didn't work. Too many others had stepped forward. Too much corroboration. The dam was breaking. Elena's second article dropped the next day, with the headline. Oil giant on the brink, internal whistleblower sparks criminal probe into safety scandal. They quoted me directly. We were told to sign off on death traps. And when I refused, they tried to silence me. But I documented everything. And now, they'll answer for it. The story included photos. Names. Quotes from Jason, from Gary Tran, even from anonymous crew who had once been afraid to speak. Raven Rock stock tanked 37% in 1 week. The CEO resigned. And then, the hammer dropped. The Department of Justice filed federal criminal charges against multiple Raven Rock executives for conspiracy to defraud regulators and endanger lives. Damon Voss was arrested on obstruction and falsification charges. And I was asked to testify before a congressional subcommittee on offshore energy regulation. Jason flew in to watch. So did Gary. So did 5 other crew members I hadn't seen in months. Men who had once looked to me for leadership on the platform, now sitting behind me, silent sentinels of the truth we'd fought to reveal. I stood before the panel and spoke into the microphone. My name is Gene Morrigan. I was fired for doing my job. But I never stopped doing it. I thought we'd won. The charges had been filed. The platforms were shut down. Damon was in custody. I had just given public testimony that made national news. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe. But Raven Rock wasn't dead yet. They were wounded, bleeding publicly, but far from finished. And like any wounded predator, they lashed out with teeth bared. It started with a phone call. Unknown number. Blocked caller ID. Mr. Morrigan, said a voice as smooth as marble. I'm calling on behalf of Raven Rock Energy's legal division. We're aware of your recent involvement. I didn't respond. I'm authorized to offer you a settlement. 7 figures. Clean NDA. Immediate cessation of all public statements. I almost laughed. You think I'll take your hush money now? You should consider it, he said calmly. Because if you don't, we will escalate. Is that a threat? No, Mr. Morrigan. It's a promise. I hung up. An hour later, my email was hacked. Then my landlord received a call from someone claiming I was under criminal investigation and a security risk. Then came the news article. A smear piece, clearly planted, alleging that I had faked the videos. That I'd had a personal grudge against Damon Voss after being passed over for promotion. That I had a history of insubordination and mental instability. It was desperate. But dangerous. The public believed me, for now. But public opinion is fragile. A single crack can grow fast when money pours through it. I called Diana. She was furious. They're trying to poison the well. Discredit you. Destroy the case by undermining the messenger. Can they? No, she said, but I heard hesitation. Not legally. But the court of public opinion isn't as stable as a courtroom. I'd spent my life protecting lives with procedures and data. But now? Now I was in a different battlefield, where facts were twisted, and justice had to fight perception. And that's when the twist hit me like a gut punch. Jason called, his voice tight. Gene, there's something you need to see. He sent me a forwarded email chain, one that had accidentally remained in a shared company inbox after Jason's recent rig transfer. It was dated weeks before my firing. The subject line: Morrigan situation, containment strategy. In the body, a Raven Rock executive was discussing my termination before Damon ever gave the order. They referred to me as a procedural bottleneck and internal risk exposure. They even mentioned my 22-year clean safety record as a liability. He's respected by the crew. If he turns, others may follow. Remove with cause. Bury with performance documentation. Prepare preemptive PR backup. It was all there. The truth I'd suspected, the one no one wants to admit. They didn't fire me because I was wrong. They fired me because I was right, and too trusted. They planned everything. Even the smear campaign. They tried to assassinate my credibility, because they couldn't touch my character. I sent the emails to Elena, to Diana, and to the whistleblower advocacy group. All at once. The response was immediate. Elena published a second bombshell story. Exposed, oil giants secretly plotted retaliation against whistleblower months before firing. This time, the fallout wasn't slow. It was instant. The DOJ expanded their case to include retaliation and whistleblower suppression. That added another layer of criminal charges. The SEC announced a formal investigation into Raven Rock's executive practices. And then came the biggest reversal of all. A class action lawsuit from the families of crew members across 4 rigs, and I was named as their key witness. That's when Raven Rock's real empire began to collapse. Damon Voss took a plea deal to avoid full trial. In exchange for reduced sentencing, he handed over everything: meeting recordings, private documents, even Slack transcripts from Raven Rock's executive team. One of them read: "As long as Gene Morrigan is out of the picture, compliance will stop resisting." That single line buried them. Within 48 hours, the CEO resigned. 2 board members followed. The company's share price dropped below junk status. Offshore leases were suspended indefinitely. And Atlas 9. It was declared permanently unfit for operation. Everything they built on silence came crashing down under the weight of the truth. But it wasn't over yet. Diana called again. "They want you at the sentencing hearing," she said. "For a statement." I showed up in my only suit, the same one I wore to my daughter's graduation years ago. And I stood before the court, not for me. For the men still working on those platforms. For the ones who died because someone looked at a safety valve and saw lost profits instead of lives. And I said, I didn't want revenge. I wanted accountability. But when you silence the truth eventually screams. And now, everyone's hearing it. The courtroom was silent after I finished my statement. No gavel struck. No words of protest. Just silence. The kind that hangs in the air like a storm waiting to break. And then the judge spoke. "Mr. Morgan, your courage has not gone unnoticed. This court recognizes the gravity of your testimony and the consequences you endured to bring this truth forward." I didn't blink. I didn't nod. I just breathed. Because for the first time in years, I could. Damon Voss was sentenced to 2 years in federal prison, reduced, yes, but not erased. He'd never work in the oil industry again. His career was over. His name, scorched. Several Raven Rock executives weren't so lucky. The DOJ handed down criminal charges for conspiracy, regulatory fraud, and retaliation. 3 of them pled guilty. 2 were convicted after trial. Fines totaling over $200 million were levied. Atlas Platform 9 was dismantled and decommissioned. Permanently. And I walked away from that courthouse not with revenge burning in my chest, but with something colder, cleaner. Justice. 3 months later, I was standing on the deck of a new platform, Blue Horizon Station, operated by Blue Water Global. A competitor. An ally. A second chance. I hadn't gone looking for the job. But Alex Reeves, their operations chief, called me the week after the verdict. "We want you to build something new," he'd said. "A safety division run by someone who actually gives a damn." I agreed, on one condition: I bring my team. Jason Parker. Alan from IT. Even 2 of the crew who'd stood beside me in silence while Raven Rock buried the truth. We started small. A single division. Then a training program. Now, we're building a platform-wide initiative that's spreading to rigs across the Gulf. No more shortcuts. No more signatures on lies. No more graves dug by greed. I was even invited to speak at an offshore energy conference in Dallas. I almost said no. But then I thought about the 20-year-old version of me, the one who stood on his first rig deck, wide-eyed and terrified, thinking it was all just steel and schedules. I stood at the podium, no notes, no script. "My name is Gene Morgan." I was fired for being too careful. Too slow. Too loud. For insisting we double-check a bolt that didn't feel right, or that we hold off a drill sequence until a red light went green. They said I was costing them money. What I was actually saving were lives. Let that be your standard. When I stepped off stage, people stood and clapped. Not out of pity. But out of recognition. The truth, once twisted, had finally straightened. I still live in the same apartment. Still keep my clipboard from Atlas 9 on a shelf. The metal's scratched, the writing faded. But I keep it as a reminder of the life I lived, and the line I refused to cross. Diana Foster and I still talk. She says the case is now used as a training module for new federal inspectors. "We call it the Morgan Protocol," she joked once. I laughed, but the name stuck. Sometimes, I sit alone and remember the worst moments, being told I was done, watching Damon smirk, hearing the corporate silence after my complaint. And then I remember the best, Jason sliding that USB across the diner table. Gary saying, "You're doing what I couldn't." The judge saying, "Your courage has not gone unnoticed." That's the story now. Not just of one man, but of everyone who decided enough was enough. We weren't just oil men. We were the last line between policy and peril. Between profit and people. And we chose right. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.